the injury. It's not about the injury. It's about the recovery. It's about the recovery.
Hi folks, Paul Padda with the Paul Padda Podcast. Welcome to another edition. Today we have a phenomenal guest, someone I'm really excited to talk to. We're coming to you live from Red Chimp Studios. It's really an honor to have Joy Oliver with us today. Joy, welcome for coming. First of all, thank you for coming on to the show and welcome being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to see you and meet you.
Here.
So I see you around the building because you're obviously, tell us a little bit about what you do and where you work.
So I am a director for a hospice, and we're Serenity Hospice. We're actually Paul's neighbor, and we provide great care to patients in the community that have a terminal diagnosis.
Okay.
And usually they're deemed as having 6 months or less, which is not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
We have patients who have cancer and live for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really a great type of service because there's so much stigma around the talk of end of life.
Yeah.
Which I think I'm pretty passionate about it because I think it's going to happen to all of us, you know.
It's the
at some point
part of life, I guess.
It's part of life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say unfortunate, but it's just the circle of life, right? Birth and death.
Yes.
So before we get into all of that, and I have a lot of questions for you
Go
because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there and confusion about what is actually hospice. But this is the segment of the show where we like to actually delve into our guest's personal background.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about where you're from, how long have you lived in Vegas, and what brought you here?
Okay. I'm from California. I actually just moved out here in March of this year. And I have extensive background. I've been a registered nurse since 2010, and I've been involved in hospice for about 9 years, on and off, and I have extensive background in case management. So a lot of patients who are high risk, meaning like they go to the hospital all the time, and they have a lot of multiple comorbidities that make them really sick.
Yeah.
But what else? I'm fumbling around.
I have so much respect for nurses because nurses, I think, like teachers, often tend to be overlooked. We don't pay enough respect and money to our teachers. And I feel the same way about nurses. You know, nurses are always in that support role in the hospital or medical setting. The doctor seems to get a lot of credit, but you talk to any real physician and they'll tell you without nurses, nothing happens.
Yes.
And it's really a tough job because you're on the front lines dealing with the patients. Yeah. So I think you probably are a person who has a lot of patience, I'm sure.
And definitely when you work in hospice, it takes a special type of person. Yeah. Because not only are you dealing with the patient, you're dealing with a lot of the family dynamics.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but it's like I kind of feel like a therapist, or I guess like a divorce lawyer maybe. Because sometimes all the ugly comes out.
Of course, yeah.
And but I think that it's really important to really have a conversation about what it is that are your wishes.
So you moved here from California in March of this year.
Yep.
To be the director of patient care at Serenity Hospice.
Yes.
What, for our viewers out there, many people probably have an idea of what hospice. Obviously most people have heard the term, including myself, but probably not fully aware of what it is. To explain to our viewers what actually is hospice care.
Hospice care is pretty much, accepting that you do have a terminal diagnosis. Sometimes we have patients that are kind of that in-between phase where they have something major happen to them health-wise. They go to the hospital, they come out. Yeah. They're no longer at their baseline. So this is where we come in. Automatically, people assume that when you're on hospice, you die. Sometimes we have patients that actually get better. Yeah. And they come off service, and that's called extended prognosis. And actually, they love having the support at home. You don't have to go back to your physician on a regular basis to get. We give the full care on at home.
So basically, hospice is home health care.
Home health care, and there's facilities out here in Las Vegas, inpatient facilities, which is not something that we do have in California.
Okay.
But here in Las Vegas, you guys have inpatient units where patients can go there to die, but you do have to have a symptom.
Does Serenity have that facility?
We do not. We actually do have, most of our patients are out in their home or living in an assisted living or group home or a skilled nursing facility.
So if someone, let's say they're discharged from the hospital, they have a terminal illness, maybe they're dealing with cancer, what would Serenity do for them?
So we would come in and a nurse would evaluate. Obviously, if you have cancer, you automatically qualify. You can have chronic conditions such as CHF or heart failure or COPD. Those are most of the patients that end up coming off our service because we stabilize them.
Yeah.
But you do have like HIV patients, patients with ALS, those type of things. But we provide we give them as much quality time with their family. We mostly manage symptoms in the home. We have a nurse that comes out regularly on a weekly basis, depending on what your needs are and what type of support you have in the home setting.
Yeah.
We do send out bath aides that can assist with care, daily care, activities of daily living type of stuff.
So I think I have a better idea when you refer to the fact that you almost become a part of that family in some ways, right? And you become privy to probably a lot of the emotional issues that are occurring in a home.
Yeah.
Where if a loved one has, let's say, a very serious medical condition, obviously that's going to bring a lot of stress to family life, but you all get involved with that as well.
We do. We have social workers, we have chaplains who provide spiritual support and emotional support to not only just the patient but also the family.
Yeah.
And also we provide bereavement counseling for up to 13 months. That's a type of service that hospice also offers to people who actually need support after they've lost a loved one.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes if you've been on service for a long time, you deal with it in different phases. But there's also our social workers also provide resources out in the community, like support groups.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a program we just attended, and it was a We Honor Vets event, and they have this thing called the Mission Act where vets can get additional support in addition to hospice in the home care setting.
And so if someone wanted your services, is that covered by Medicare or Medicaid? Is it insurance coverage that covers that?
Like most of our patients are Medicare and also Medicaid.
I see. Okay.
You guys don't have Medicaid.
You have Medicaid. Yeah, you're still stuck in California, Joy. Now you're in Nevada.
I'm sorry. But hospice is it's a little different out here for sure. But I do think, again, that people die better if you, I think, have that conversation early on.
Yeah.
And there's such a stigma around it. People even say, I don't want to talk about it because I might bring death on. Actually, no. Every day you're getting closer to the end. I hate to say it. So you just have to kind of live in the moment, have a full life. I tell patients that all the time when they come on.
Gosh,
hey, you know what? If you want to eat, even though you're diabetic, nurses aren't supposed to say this, but it's like you've accepted that this is kind of your condition. You just want to be happy,
That's really an interesting point. I mean, it's an existential point, but it's the concept of death, how we deal with it. I have elderly parents, and I dread the idea that I, may not have them one day, and it's something that everybody deals with, and I see people struggle with it. And you're right, it's something that we don't like to talk about in our society, but it happens to everyone ultimately.
Yeah, because I had a patient once who was 23 years old and was walking to the park with her dog, and she got ran over.
Oh, jeez.
You don't think about that, but she had a really good family support. And like I said, even my husband, he was hospitalized. He's 30, and he was so appalled that a social worker came in to ask about filling out a physician order for life-sustaining, a pulse, to say what if something were to happen to you, who would you want to designate as a person who can make that decision for you? I think that having that in place at an early part of your life, I think every decade you need to look at that pulse. Who do you want to assign as the health proxy to make decisions for you if you are unable to physically or mentally, if you don't have the mental capacity to make decisions for your
Well, now you're touching on a legal
yourself.
topic. I think that's really important. And again, you're right. People don't want to talk about death. They don't want to think about it. You know, obviously it's the worst end scenario, but
Yeah.
sometimes we have to be prepared. So what happens, I mean, I guess you deal with, why don't you explain to our viewers what is an advance directive?
Okay. First of all, I think that death isn't the end of all things. I think sometimes it can be a really beautiful experience.
Yeah.
And again, I think when you prepare for like things that you're going to need at the end, which is good family support. I think
Yes.
as a human, we kind of have this tendency to feel, oh, you know, I don't need anybody.
Yeah,
But actually, we all need each other.
right.
In terms of advanced healthcare directives, our social workers do come in after we admit someone on service to find out if they do have a power of attorney that they've designated as a health proxy. We don't really deal with the financial portion. The living
Like a living will.
living will.
Right.
No, living will I think has directives about what you want.
Yeah,
But like the financial portion, we don't touch that.
right.
But we do look at that and make sure that they have a pulse.
Well, it's important for people to plan this out, right? Because if you, as a loved one, you could be in a really difficult position where you have to make important decisions where someone might be incapacitated. And it's a lot easier if you know what that person's wishes were in advance.
Yes, and that's why I think that that conversation is really important to have with friends and family members.
Yeah.
And I think also that it's really important to kind of pick someone, I hate to say it, but that's not so emotionally tied to you, but can respect your wishes and you know that they'll carry that out. And
Right.
sometimes you kind of think about that.
Yeah.
I've had to think about that myself and who that will be. I think my husband would probably want to like keep me alive as long as he could, but
Yeah.
but I know for myself that if I'm unable to make decisions for myself, then I would probably want to not extend that,
Sure.
you know, and kind of be like a burden. But, you know, again, preparation for end of life, I think, is really good because people ask me, and it's kind of morbid. They think I'm morbid with my response, but they say, what's your goal in life? And my goal in life is to have a really good death.
Yeah. Wow. That could be a tagline. I don't know for what, but it's for something. All right. Well, on that note, we've reached a point in our show where we take a little break, and we
Okay,
have some
great.
tips that we throw out called Paul Padda for the People. Just giving some good advice out there. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Hey folks, Paul Padda from Paul Padda Law, wishing you a happy holiday season. Today I want to talk to you about concussions. Many people don't realize that a concussion is a form of brain injury. It's a traumatic brain injury. There's different levels of brain injuries. There's mild, moderate, severe, but a concussion can be a very serious condition. Many of our clients experience symptoms like depression, the moody blues, just, you know, uncontrollable crying, feeling different after an accident. And many of them don't realize that they might have sustained a concussion. What happens is when our clients come to us, we make sure we get them to the right doctors to do a complete workup. And often clients are very surprised to find out that they have a concussion. And obviously, if you don't know you have a problem, you can't fix the problem. But once you've been diagnosed with a concussion by the right type of doctor, you can get on the right course of treatment to help get you back to where you were before the accident. So a concussion is a very serious condition that should never be taken lightly. At Paul Padda Law, we want to make sure our clients get the absolute best medical care. Again, Paul Padda, wishing you a very happy holiday. Please be safe out there. On behalf of myself and my law firm, happy holidays. So Joy, we were talking and we finished with a very interesting concept. I don't think I've ever heard a guest or anyone express it this way, is that your goal in life is to have a good death. That's a very interesting way of putting it. But I actually kind of understand what you're saying in the sense that, you know, life is so unexpected. There's so many things. As a personal injury attorney, I encounter people every day who come into my office who've encountered a situation that they didn't wake up that morning expecting that they would be in. And, you know, you could end up in a very bad car accident, it could have life-altering consequences. Maybe you're even in a vegetative state and all the people that love you are around you and they're confused as to what to do because their emotions kick in and, you know, they have to make decisions. And
Right.
so what you, I think, essentially are saying is that you want to be able to plan it out so that, number one, you're not a burden on anybody.
Right.
You also have some say in what happens to you, God forbid.
Yeah.
You're at that point. And it's just basically like life planning.
Yes, yes,
A lot
life
of people,
planning.
most of us don't think that way though, but that's interesting. I get the sense that you're probably a really good planner, right? Do you plan your whole week out, like starting Sunday, this is what I'm going to do every day?
Yeah, it might not come off that way to my husband, but yeah, on paper, I'm pretty, I'm pretty well planned out.
Yeah.
I think that I do like to think about how to make sure that I have things in place for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it
But
makes
you're
sense.
absolutely right. I am kind of a planner.
So my sense of you is you have a very bubbly personality. You seem very level-headed and actually a very calming person to be around.
Oh, thank you.
But
Paul.
how do you, as a human being, deal with grief? Because you're constantly surrounded by grief, correct?
Meditation.
Yeah.
I think that's what
Really?
yes.
Yeah.
Every morning. I think that, have you guys ever heard on social media shower meditation? Yes, that exists.
Shower meditation. Okay.
So I do a lot of meditation and prayer,
Yeah.
believe it or not, and it kind of gives me like more of a sense of peace and purpose.
Yeah.
And I think every day I try to wake up with that in mind.
I think that you make a great point, especially on the concept of prayer. You know, people have a lot of strong opinions about religion, but whatever your religious beliefs are, at the end of the day, I mean, to me, that's what the studies have shown. Prayer or meditation can have really healing effects and calming effects on people.
Yes.
And give them a lot of sense of serenity where, you know, grief is a hard concept to deal with. I mean, we've all experienced it in life,
Yes.
but I'm struck by someone who works around it all the time. It's got to take a toll on you.
It does, and I've had to, like I said, I've been involved in hospice for 9 years on and off, and you do get this thing where you have, it's called hospice burnout, and I think that happened to me when I had a patient who was 36 years old, and I had just became like a new mom,
Yeah.
and her kids luckily were grown. She had kids at an early age, but she passed away after her daughter graduated, and I think that day really just, oh my God, I'm gonna get emotional. That day kind of just like broke me.
Yeah.
And then I said, you know what, like I think it's time for me to kind of like take a break, because I think that for the most part, I try to keep it separate, you know, where you're not so emotionally involved. But I'm human, you know, and then you make that connection with someone, and then you can relate to them because of like the fact that I had just become a new mother,
Yeah.
you know, and then you know, but it was such a beautiful thing, because then her whole family came together,
Yeah.
and it brought them together, and people really stepped in to help with her kids and her husband. And again, we provided bereavement counseling, so that was hard for the kids. And
Well, you
also
know,
the
that story
husband.
you just told is heartbreaking, but it also puts it in perspective for the rest of us. Sometimes as a human beings, we all tend to sometimes get depressed about things, or
Yeah.
we have problems in life, and then you look around and you say, look at some of the things that other people have to deal with. They're just tragedies beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
That, you know, you have to step back and say, wow, my life is really good.
Yeah.
I'm healthy, I'm here, and I'm surrounded by good people. I have so much to be grateful for. I think
Yeah.
so much of life is about perspective, right?
Right, and gratitude. And you know what? That's what keeps me going,
Yeah.
really, is that every day I'm kind of reminded of how blessed I truly am to still be here.
So what type of resources do you make available to people who are dealing with grief in the hospice setting?
Again, we provide bereavement counseling, so our chaplain and our social workers reach out.
I've met your chaplain, wonderful lady.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, Grace.
Yes.
She's amazing, and she does a lot of like follow-up phone calls
Mhm.
to people that she's like connected with, because obviously we send out our chaplain, our social workers, so they really do follow up and make sure that if they need any other resources out in the community, then we provide that.
Yeah.
Also, there's kind of a thing that kind of came up here on hospice. It's called the Death Cafe, and I kind of wanted to
Death cafe.
yeah, I kind of actually wanted to be the facilitator for it. And it's to have the conversation around death and really preparing for that and accepting it. And I think what really kind of got me into this was this documentary that was held in Portland about the people who wanted patient-assisted suicide, which is another controversial issue. My family.
We love controversial issues on the show. So tell us, what are your views on the subject?
I love the idea of patient-assisted suicide, actually.
Yeah.
Which kind of contradicts with what hospice is, because with hospice, you do provide end-of-life care, but I think that they should maybe put them together.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can provide comfort, but there's certain conditions that, let's just say, there's only sometimes so much you can do.
Right.
So I think when it gets to that point, I would like to maybe have the option to have that ability to do that.
What about people who would say you're sort of playing God in the sense that you're, you know, maybe people, there might be a 1% chance even that person might come out of that situation, or there's other things that might be able to help them. The sanctity of life is such that, you know, just for the same reason people have strong opinions about abortion, here you're essentially taking someone's life, and the person who's who wants that to happen might not be in the mental or emotional state to really make an informed decision. I'm not saying those are my views, but I think that's what the critics of that would say. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, you know what? And I have a best friend who's a lawyer, and I've asked him. He does corporate law, but I'm like, you need to look into this for me.
You're asking a corporate lawyer about end of death decisions? Wow, okay. There's an authority.
But I really just kind of was like, what if I get Alzheimer's dementia?
Yeah.
Actually, there's a new health directive for Alzheimer's dementia that just passed in October for the state of Nevada. I think you're allowed to say that if you're unable to swallow, you just donate.
Yeah.
And that's hard for your families to stand by and watch.
Yeah.
But back to your question, I'm sorry.
So how do you respond to the critics who say, you know, patient-assisted suicide is really playing God, and that how do you know that that person is not momentarily so emotionally depressed that they might make a decision saying, hey, I want to end my life, but in reality, maybe with the right amount of counseling and giving them the right perspective, that maybe that's not necessarily the best decision for them?
I don't really know how to respond to that, Paul. I think that...
That's why I'm a lawyer. We get to ask the tough questions.
I know you do, but honestly, I've seen suffering.
Yeah.
And I put myself in that situation. And if I'm unable to make those decisions, and I've actually asked my best friend, I said, is there any way I can put a clause in there that says, once if I'm able, like I'm not of mental sound mind anymore, how am I going to be able to take this pill that'll just make me like sleep?
Yeah.
Like how do you work around that? And that's still kind of a gray line.
Right.
It hasn't been defined, but I think that I've seen enough suffering where I feel like it's merciful. And people may criticize me. My family's very Catholic. My family does not believe in any of this stuff, this whole being able to take a pill and end your life. But I've seen enough suffering people really suffer at the end, and I think it would be merciful to give them that option.
Yeah, I don't personally have a view on it. I'm conflicted too, because I do see both sides of the argument, and I do believe obviously in the sanctity of life, but at the same time you're 100% correct, and you can speak to this better than anybody. There's just such tremendous suffering that some people have to go through that you have to ask the question, is that
why prolong it?
Yeah, or just is there a better alternative? I mean, shouldn't people have more choice over their own life? And they do. I guess they could commit suicide, but what about the people around them, like a hospice facility or doctors, and who can't assist that without getting into criminal problems? But I think that if they were able to, maybe the manner in which people would be able to die would be much more humane and thought out. It's obviously a very complicated situation.
It is, and I think that hospice does a really good job, though. There's certain conditions where you can really manage the disease and really manage the pain well, and that they're not suffering.
Yeah.
But then sometimes there's just I mean, to be honest, like pancreatic cancer isn't really that.
Oh, yeah, that's awful.
That's a really tough one.
Yeah.
So it just depends, I think. And I think that I wish I had better input as to how to define or maybe find like ways around it, because I don't want to ever be put in that position where
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, because Alzheimer's runs in my family.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that if I become a carcass of a body, do I really want, if it's not me anymore, do I really want to continue? And the answer is actually, I probably don't. And I know that about myself, and I've seen it.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, it's such a morbid topic.
I
huh?
know we've been talking about such heavy things, but you know what? On that subject, actually, you've seen so much grief. You've also probably been witness to the amazing resilience of human beings, right?
Most
You've
definitely.
probably seen people who are physically maybe to look at very weak, small, but so strong in terms of what they deal and what they shoulder. Tell us a little bit about that in terms of what you've observed in terms of just the human spirit, the will to live.
The will to live, and also I think what's really important with like the emotional and spiritual aspect of end of life is how much love can come out of the end.
Yeah.
And how much peacefulness and closure, and sometimes there's a lot of conflict amongst family members, but yet at the time of the passing of a loved one, everybody comes together.
Yeah.
And all problems go out the door. I actually had one patient who I dreamt about. I mean, this might sound a little kooky, but I dreamt about him. And the funny thing is, I had no idea that there were like law issues between his kids.
Yeah.
And in my dream, he kept pointing at this piece of paper. So at one of my visits, literally right before he passed away, I said, you know what, I had a dream about your dad. And he kept pointing at this piece of paper.
Wow. That's
and,
amazing.
She called me later and then told me what was really behind all of that. So it's weird.
Fascinating.
It's definitely, there's some pretty like weird things too that happen at the end that kind of questions, like, it actually makes me have more faith in some sort of higher being.
Yeah.
And that there is God. Because at one point in my life, I kind of thought, is there really a God? But I think working in hospice definitely makes me have more faith.
Yeah. Well, it has to be something, right? A higher being of some kind. You wonder because just the way things happen sometimes.
Yeah, and just things that like are not just by coincidence.
Yeah.
Certain times when people pass, or sometimes they're just waiting for a loved one to arrive, or if they're unable to arrive, like FaceTiming, just to hear that person's voice, and then someone passes. And
well, when you think about the concept of death and you deal with it all the time, I mean, gosh, I think if everyone had the perspective that, you know, we're only here for a limited period of time, maybe there would be more peace and love in the world and understanding. And people fight about so much crazy stuff. And
that don't matter.
That doesn't matter at the end, right?
At the end. And I think what matters at the end is the people that you love. You have all those people that you love around you and that you build. And then you kind of look back at your life and you think about how much impact you do have on other people, because then they show up at the end, you know. Those are the reasons.
I have loved having you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
If people want to find out more about Serenity, where would they go to find out information?
We're here at 4560 Decatur Boulevard, Suite 301. And our phone number is 702-220-7109.
Is there a website?
Yes, it's Serenity, www.serenityhospicelv.com.
Joy, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Folks, that's a wrap for another show. Well, till next time, we'll see you then. Take care.
I'm sorry, Paul.
It's not about